Okay, this one's bent pretty bad because look at how many points of light I want to share with you. Now, when a book is that good, you know it's going to take us a while. Pardon me, gotta put on the glasses to get through it. So let me read you the back. Love is the wild card. Commitment-phobic Colorado cowboy Griffin McAllister had it all figured out. Do the reality dating shows get the money his family desperately needed and go on with his life? Actually, falling in love was never part of the deal. Least of all, falling in love with the show's director. Maggie Sullivan knew that she found a star the minute she met Griffin, but she gets to know the man behind the dimples. She realizes she might have found something more. It doesn't matter, though. She has a job to do. Besides, how could he ever notice her while he's busy wooing 10 gorgeous women? Now Griffin has the chance to stick with the plan and lose Maggie forever, or risk everything to chance to win her heart. This is To Bet on a Cowboy by Julie Benson, the Western Heart series. And we're going to start in here. It says, an avid daydreamer since childhood. Julie Benson always loved creating stories after graduating from the University of Texas at Dallas with a degree in sociology. She worked as a case manager before having her children, 3 boys. Many years later, she started pursuing a writing career to challenge her mind and save her sanity. Now she writes full-time in Dallas, where she lives with her husband, their sons, 2 lovable black dogs, 2 guinea pigs, a turtle, and a fish. When she finds a very little quiet time, which isn't often, she enjoys making jewelry, reading a good book. Okay. It says, to Joe Davis, Jane Graves, Nancy Haddock, 3 of the strongest women I know. Thanks for talking me off the ledge, slapping me upside the head when I needed it. I'm blessed to have you as friends. To Starbucks crew at Custer and Renner and Richardson, especially Jennifer Jacobson, Jenny Schumfuff, I apologize, Jenny, I can't pronounce that name. Melissa Bloom, thanks for all of your support and encouragement with this story. Moving forward, going to the first point of light. Maybe. Okay, page 18. Are you here for a horseback riding tour? He asked finally. I'm afraid I'm here on business. Or I'm afraid not, I'm here on business. She waited for his eyes to fill with recognition at the sound of her voice, but instead they twinkled, giving her the chance for a fresh start. What business would a pretty city woman like you have at a horse ranch? Pretty city woman? Maggie almost laughed and asked him whether he was delusional or needed glasses. No one, not even her family, who loved her dearly, had ever described her as pretty. The closest she came was passably cute, and she hadn't heard that word used in conjunction with her name since she was 12. Obviously, the horse beside her wasn't the only charmer around. Have you ever thought about being on TV? You're a natural. Viewers would love Griffin. His charisma would leak out on television screens across America. Page 19. He shoved his hands into his pockets, leaned back on his heels, and smiled. Lethal. I got to admit, a woman's never used that line to get my attention. He thought she was coming on to him. Once again, she doubted his sanity. No way would a woman like her think she stood a chance with a man like him. Griffin belonged with models or Miss Colorado, not a plain Jane. It's not a come-on. I'm Maggie Sullivan. We spoke on the phone. His smile evaporated. I told you I wasn't interested. Since I flew here from Los Angeles to talk to you, it would only be polite for you to hear me out. I didn't ask you to come. That gets me off the hook. He turned and stalked off toward the barn. Maggie was chasing after him. She smiled. There was nothing better than walking behind a man with an exquisite butt and a pair of jeans. I bought pictures of this season's bachelorettes. Griffin stopped at the barn door and faced her. Lady, can't you take a hint? Page 20. She held out the file. Look at the women's pictures. What part of I'm not interested is hard for you to understand? I understand it. I just don't accept it. He shook his head. If I look at these pictures, will you leave me alone? Absolutely. She resisted the urge to shove the folder into his hand and instead held it out. He took the folder and then reached for the barn door. Wood groaned and hinges squeaked as he tugged it open. They stepped inside. If you have hay fever, you should head out now. He wouldn't get rid of her that easily. Little did he know that a girl with 3 older brothers learned persistence at a survival skill. Hay doesn't bother me. Griffin turned on the lights. Next, he pulled out the photos and flipped through them. Maggie shoved her hands into her pants pockets and crossed her fingers. She bit her lip. No smile, no twinkling eyes. Where was his excitement? From his deadpan expression, she guessed he was reviewing his tax return rather than photos of beautiful women. How could he resist the sight of so many gorgeous females, fail to elicit at least a grin? You're right, the women are attractive, but I'm still not interested. He handed the file back to Maggie, but she refused to accept it. Okay, wait a minute. Are you gay? He stiffened, carefully set the folder on a stool and crossed his arms over his broad chest. What makes you ask that? Most red-blooded heterosexual men show some interest when they look at pictures of stunning women, but you didn't. You think I'm gay because I didn't get all hot and bothered looking at those photos? Griffin stepped closer until they stood inches apart. His sparkling gaze pinned her. When he glanced at her mouth, all coherent thought deserted her. He leaned forward as he might kiss her, sending her body into overdrive. Reality check, Maggie. You're not his type. He slipped his arms around her waist and pulled her against his hard form, leaving her dazed. She couldn't breathe. His mouth moved towards hers. He's going to kiss me. I can't let him kiss me. Why would he want to kiss me? She jumped backward, never graceful at the best of times. Their feet tangled and she lost her balance. That was 20-21-22. Her rear end hit the cement floor hard with a decidedly unfeminine thud. I bet you're used to all women falling at your feet all the time, she quipped in an attempt to ease her embarrassment. Not like this. Griffin held out his hand, but she shook off his offer. As she stood, she resisted the urge to rub her sore backside. That fall would leave her with a nice bruise. I am not gay. I believe you. Maggie looked away from Griffin's piercing gaze and regrouped. Once in control again, she crossed her arms over her chest. You didn't read the bios on the other side of the photo. You said you'd leave me alone if I looked at the pictures. No bachelor meant no show. No show meant no job and no money, which meant she had to put her dreams of motherhood on hold. I know I did, but you don't understand how great this opportunity is. The television exposure will be phenomenal. It could bring in a lot of business to this ranch, and who knows what other opportunities. Is there somewhere we can go talk more? You're as persistent as horseflies around here. You might as well hear me out, because I'm not going anywhere until you do. He stalked across the barn, dismissing her. I need to get to work. Again she trailed after him as he strolled through the barn and stepped inside the last stall. A minute later he came out, a bale of hay in his arms. His cotton shirt stretched tight against his chest. His biceps flexed and bulged. Maggie's mouth went dry. If Griffin decided to go into politics, he'd win by a landslide on the women's votes alone, and he wouldn't have to say a word. After dumping the bale on the cement floor, he reached into his back pocket, pulled out wire cutters, drawing her attention to his rear end again. The faded denim emphasized his rock-hard thighs, and the air around her just grew thin. The temperature in the barn was sweltering. He snipped the twine and pulled off a hunk of hay. A bit of gold dust swirled in the air. The musty smell tickled her nose. I can't take time off work. My answer is still no. His earthy male scent mixed with the fragrant hay wafted over her as he I can't talk tonight, I apologize. As he strode into the next stall. Did I mention that we're going to pay you $3,000 an episode? This time, when he exited the stall, his eyes gleamed with interest. You should have told me that at first. That's 22-23-24. Men went out on her show for one of 3 reasons: the money, the gorgeous women, or the exposure. She and Samantha were wrong. Neither the women nor the publicity interested Griffin. Money was the key. How many episodes are we talking about? He pulled off another chunk of hay and walked into the next stall. Maggie followed. 10. That's $3,000 an episode for 10 weeks. $30,000. That's what you would get paid in compensation for taking 2.5 months off work. Inside the stall, the cinnamon-colored mare's ears perked up at Griffin's entrance, and the magnificent animal whinnied. I know, girl, I'm running late, and you're a little ticked with me, and it's not my fault. He nodded toward Maggie. Talk to her. She slowed me down this morning. Maggie wanted to laugh. He had to be kidding. Griffin possessed the air of a man who took his sweet time and figured the world would wait for him. Looking at the animal, she said, My apologies. I'm sure it's my fault Griffin's tardy for this morning. On the rare occasion I'm running late, she forgives me because of my sparkling personality, don't you, pretty lady? Maggie bet the horse wasn't the only female who ignores his tardiness. Sorry I've got to call you on that one. I'm guessing that's your fatal flaw. His eyes widened as he couldn't possibly believe what she said. Women possibly overlooked his little white lies all the time. You're wrong. My mother was a stickler for punctuality and drilled that trait into me. Then what is your fatal flaw? He smiled, revealing his killer dimples. What makes you think I have one? Maggie paused to collect her thoughts. She could barely see straight, much less talk with him looking right at her. She'd have to get over that little problem when they started filming. A man like Griffin wouldn't even give you a second look. In her mind, she's thinking. True, but that didn't mean she couldn't enjoy the scenery. That was 24 and 25. Here's 26. Are you telling me you're perfect? Griffin sauntered across the stall, the horse trailing after him as he dumped the hay in the trough and attracted to the far wall. He said, That's what my mom says. That doesn't count. It's the law that mothers have to say that about their kids. Maggie smiled. Even mine cuts me slack for my overly competitive nature. What if I ask your brother? For the briefest second, Griffin's eyes narrowed. Rory would tell you that I'm too laid back, but with him you have to factor in the whole sibling rivalry thing, so you can't really trust his opinion. Something told her that for Griffin this was more than your average sibling rivalry. I have 3 older brothers, and they can be a pain and definitely are judgmental. Your brothers gave you a hard time? Constantly and mercilessly. As Maggie stared into Griffin's eyes, she couldn't remember what they'd been even talking about. She thought for a minute. That's right. They'd been talking about his fatal flaw. Oh, this cowboy was good at getting around the uncomfortable questions. He lifted the remaining hay, and strong arm muscles ripped under his shirt, and he strolled out of that stall. Sweat glistened on his bronze skin. Yep, God had done some of his best work with this man. What if I agree to be the bachelor on your next show? What happens next? First of all, I want to make sure that we're clear on one thing. You do realize the purpose of our show is to find you a wife, right? That's page 26 and 27. We start up on page 30. On top of that, he pegged her as a good girl, the kind who expected a ring after dating 6 months, the kind that he crossed the street to avoid. Sure, I know the goal is to get the bachelor married just because that's what the show is intended, but that doesn't mean that he has to succumb. There were always gray areas. He had to just find that one. Griffin had always loved women. Even as a child, he'd run past his grandfather to reach his grandmother first, but that didn't mean he wanted to walk her down the aisle anytime soon. In fact, he wasn't sure he wanted to make that trek. I have a contract in the car. Once you sign, hold on, I have some questions, such as, where's the show film? Maggie's eyes were shining with enthusiasm as she spoke. The season we're filming is in Las Vegas. Normally, the first thing we have our bachelor do is fill out a questionnaire and meet with our marriage counselor. Then we select him 10 bachelorettes, ideally suited just for him. What do you mean, normally? We've already signed the contracts with this season's bachelorettes. Because, he prodded, the woman had talked his ear off and now she went quiet. Our scheduled bachelor backed out at the last minute. Does he know something I don't? Griffin asked as he tossed a hunk of hay in the sugar's trough. He was a retired pro football player who returned to the game. We picked out the bachelorettes for him. Of course, there's a possibility of some of the women will leave when they learn that we have a new man. You're saying they'll think I'm a scrub replacement. Maggie gasped. Embarrassment flamed across her cheeks. I'm not saying that at all. I apologize for my poor choice of words. No woman could see you that way. He couldn't help from grinning. I had you worried, didn't I? She laughed, but not one of those dainty, practiced venom giggles. Joy rang out in full, honest laughter, and that lit up her face. And I almost dropped the book. That was 30-31. Here's 32. That was a good one. You really had me going. You think with 3 older brothers you wouldn't be so gullible, Griffin retorted. She crossed her arms over her chest again. In my defense, I'm in work mode right now. Believe it or not, very few people tease me when I'm discussing business. Are you always so vexing? Pretty much. Maggie's metallic laughter reverberated, though the barn was once more. But Griffin sobered. An athlete. That meant that they'd probably pick the women who like sports and the outdoors, ones who'd be comfortable on a ranch. Not exactly what he wanted. You want me to pick a wife from women you selected for another man? He asked, already slipping into the charade. Wouldn't that be the man who really wanted to find a wife would say? You're not going to get me again. This time I'm serious. Sorry, the altitude must be messing with my radar. Maggie frowned and tucked a stray brown curl that escaped from her ponytail behind her ear. I think you'll be happy with the women that we've selected, and if for whatever reason the Bachelorette chooses not to continue with the show, the new candidate will be selected specifically for you. What if I'm not satisfied? After all, my happiness isn't your main concern. You've got to pick candidates who will make good TV. His main concern was avoiding marriage while getting the 30 grand. He ran his hand along Sugar's expanding belly, and her foal moved under his palm. This horse swung her head toward him. I know, girl, you're ready for this baby to be here, aren't you? Watching a foal coming into the world must be such a miracle, Maggie said. Changing the subject won't work. What happens if I'm not happy with who you've picked? Out of 10 women, you really think you might not like any of them? Come on, no man can be that particular. She had no idea how picky he was about to become. We're talking about finding me a wife. I need to be sure that I can spend the rest of my life with one of these ladies. He almost smiled at how easily he played this game, telling Maggie that what she was wanting to hear without technically lying. He'd find someone to spend his life with about the same time he decided to work at a 9-to-5 desk job. This is 32, 33, 34. We've never had a bachelor unhappy with our choices before. When I've studied the bios, and if I don't like what I see, I want veto power. She clasped her hands in front of her. Veto power? Tell me you're not a control freak. Like I said, I'm pretty laid back, but I'm not big on trusting someone I just met with something this important. Maggie bit her lip, and her leaf green eyes focused right on him, and he froze. The intensity in her gaze surprised and intrigued him. Such fire. If it weren't for those gorgeous eyes, he'd call her plain, but they changed everything. A woman with that much heat flashing in her eyes, but dressed in baggy pants 2 sizes too big, and baggy cardigan, made Griffin wonder what she wanted to hide and why. If we break the Bachelorette's contracts, we still have to pay them. That would be the cost the show money, but more importantly, recasting would take time that we don't have. We're scheduling to start shooting in 2 weeks. You could always find another bachelor, but if you do, it's your loss. He shot her the smile he used with his high school teachers whenever he asked for an assignment extension. It hadn't failed him yet. It seems unreasonable for you to have complete veto power. When faced with her resistance, he paused to calculate his next move. He wanted to be able to make changes in case they weren't enough career-minded types. The last thing he wanted was 10 women looking for a man to save them from whatever mess they made of their lives, financially or otherwise. Still smiling, he stepped toward Maggie. Their gazes locked. He lowered his voice and whispered, I'm not asking for much. Surely you can give me this. A smile spread across her face. Her eyes twinkled. He had her. Nice try turning on the charm, but this is a business deal, and that is how I'm treating it. Now that was a curve he had not expected. Where had he gone wrong? Women worked hard to please him and rarely gave him grief. Then we're at a standoff. I'll give you 2 vetoes, Maggie countered. 6. Out of 10 women, forget it. 3. That's my final offer. Take it or leave it. That's 34, 35, 36, and 37. He thought about countering with 5, but the iron resolve on her face, with the confidence in her eyes, along with a braced stance, told him she would not budge. Deal. I want it added to the contract. He hadn't won, but on the upside he hadn't lost either. I have to run it by my boss in legal, but I think they'll go for it. Once they approve the change, I'll have them email a new contract. Is there anything else you need to know before you sign? How do I avoid proposing on the last show is what he's thinking. No, he didn't need advice. He ended enough relationships to have a stockpile of strategies. After the women are selected, do I start dating? I'm guessing that you don't watch our show. Why would he? Dating and playing pool beat the hell out of watching some poor smuck who couldn't find a wife on his own date a bunch of women picked by someone else. Nope, the only reality shows I watch are Survivor and The Amazing Race. On our shows, the early episodes are mixers, Maggie explained. You go to the mansion where the bachelorettes live, you circulate among women, spending time getting to know them. And all of them would want to catch his attention and please him. Now that was his idea of a good time. I'll know where the women are living. Will they know where I'm staying? No, both your contract and theirs state that your contract is limited to the dating situations. If we have the cameras positioned all over the bachelorette mansions and they're monitored and taping 24/7. That way we can obtain footage of the women interacting and talking about you. It also allows us to know if anyone leaves the house. Cameras? Everywhere? That little tidbit threw a kink into things. He wasn't keen on being on TV and even less thrilled about living in a fishbowl, especially considering the game he'd been playing. Are the cameras where I'll be staying? Maggie shook her head. Since none of the dates will occur there, we didn't go to the expense. Griffin relaxed, thankful for their budget-conscious executives. I'm staying in a house with all the hotels in Las Vegas. We like to maintain a low profile to keep details like who you eliminate each week a secret until the episode airs. That would be difficult to do in a hotel with other guests and staff around all the time. That made sense. Here's page 38, 39. When you picked out the 2 finalists, we do a getaway weekend, Maggie continued. The only segment that's live is the finale. Taping allows us to edit each week's footage for the most impact, and then we air the show 2 weeks later. After a break from the Christmas holiday, we shoot the finale where you choose your Ms. Right. Not if he could help it. When can you send me the contract with the changes to me? The sooner he signed, the sooner he could start working on earning money. Legal should be able to deliver it tonight. I'll bring the paperwork over as soon as it arrives. No way would he risk Maggie returning to the ranch and getting anywhere near his mother. The longer Griffin avoided telling his mother what he'd done, the better, because that task would take major planning. How about you go to your hotel and contact legal? I'll finish my chores, clean up, and when you have the contract ready, call me. By then, I'll studied the bios, and we can take care of business and go somewhere for dinner. She frowned again. The woman sure did that a lot. Life was too short and precarious to worry that much. I'm not certain that's a good idea, since we'll be working together. That doesn't mean we can't be friends. She flinched. Damn, now he hurt her feelings. Since she had the same look on her face that his sister Avery had as a child when he and Rory said that she couldn't tag along with him. Come on, I'm fun to be around, Griffin cajoled, trying to lighten the mood. Ask any of my friends. You're not the only one who can be persistent. You might as well give in. His words coaxed a smile out of her, easing his guilt over his carelessness. All right, she sighed. I have your cell number. I'll call you when I've got the contract. As Griffin stood outside Maggie's hotel door at 7:30 that night, he wondered why he even suggested they go to dinner. She offered to bring the contract to the ranch, and the next thing he knew, the invitation had just jumped out of his mouth before he thought anything through. That was 38, 39, and 40. Didn't matter. He could use tonight to find out more about what he was getting into. Plus, he needed a friend when he got to Vegas, since he'd have to be on his guard with these women that he was dating. Saying the wrong thing or picking the wrong one could cost him money, and his mother couldn't afford that. Convinced he had valid reasons for seeing Maggie, and confident it wasn't because she had the most beautiful eyes in the world, he knocked on her door. A few minutes later, she answered. The first thing he noticed was her hair. Unlike earlier, when she had it in a ponytail, long, glossy chestnut waves now flowed around her face, softening her sharp features, making her look almost pretty. She pointed to the far side of the room. The contract's on the desk. You can go over it while I finish getting ready. Maggie headed for the bathroom, and Griffin sat at the desk, knowing he had plenty of time to examine the document. No woman he ever met, other than his mother, was ready when she said she'd be. The agreement seemed fairly straightforward. He chuckled when he read how the producers and anyone associated with the program are released from liability with any consequences, emotional, medical, or otherwise, resulting from any sexual intimacies entered into by participants during the filming of the show. From what he learned from his sister when he questioned her earlier, reality shows played up the sexual tension. They worked hard to create it, pitting people against each other, and they kept alcohol flowing. Then they had the nerve to say that they weren't responsible for what happened? At least Griffin wouldn't have to worry about these issues, because no way was he getting sexually involved with any of the bachelorettes. That would only complicate things. Nothing changed a relationship like sleeping with a woman. He kept reading, finding nothing in the contract that bothered him, right up until he hit the misrepresentation clause. If the producers determined he, quote, wasn't sincere in his desire to get married, if he withheld any personal or professional information that would impact his suitability as a husband, or in any other compromise the integrity of the show, he forfeited all monies earned and faced possible legal action. 40, 41, and 42. He read the clause twice to make sure he understood. Damn, getting out of proposing might not be as easy as he thought. But how could he turn down earning some fast cash to help his family? He had to pull this off. His mom needed him to. The clause meant that he'd have to do some fancy dancing and watch his every word to avoid proposing without breaking that misrepresentation clause. A plan, that's what he needed. If he came up with a good one, remained focused and clear-headed, he could do this. Maggie, has the show ever used this misrepresentation clause? No, though we came close last year. What happened? She poked her head out of the bathroom door, a frown causing little worry lines on her forehead. Are you sure you want to do this? Of course he was, but not for the reason she thought. I answered that question this afternoon. My concern is that this clause gives you the right to ask for your money back for vague reasons. The lines above the bridge of her nose deepened. As long as you're upfront and honest about everything, you'll be fine. A knot formed at the base of his neck in her choice of words. Honesty. He had been straddling that line with that one, but honesty didn't mean a man had to share everything. Plus, he was going on this show for a good cause. His mom. That had to more than balance the scales. Then there's no problem, he said as Maggie stepped out of the bathroom. As far as he could see, the only thing she'd done was put her hair in a ponytail, pulling it back so tight that she had to have a headache. Why'd you change your hair? If I don't put it up, it gets in the way. And look better down. She blushed and smoothed her hand over her hair. You think so? You should wear it down all the time, he grinned. I'll wait while you go change it. It's fine. No sense in taking time to mess with it. She nodded toward the contract. Do you have any more questions? Instead of answering, he picked up the hotel pen beside the phone, initialed the contract where it indicated, and scrawled his signature on the last page. No turning back now. We need to talk about the women. That's 42, 43. Here's 44 and 45. He spent the afternoon scrutinizing the bios, not wanting to be sidetracked by a pretty face. He flipped the photos over and concentrated on the facts. Reading the bios made his decision easy. He concentrated on the women who'd find ranch life or moving difficult. Since relocating to Colorado would force the lawyer and the dentist to start over with their practices, they went directly into his keep pile. The job prospects for an opera singer in Estes Park were worse than dismal, and wouldn't she want to live in New York? He pulled 2 pictures from the inside pocket of his leather coat and placed them on top of the contract. I want to use my veto on these 2. Maggie picked up the first grade teacher's photo. Griffin figured if the woman faced a class full of ankle biters, what were the chances that he could scare her off? You can't veto her. Every season we need a woman who tugs at the viewer's heartstrings. This year it's the teacher. She's sweet, loves the outdoors, and has a great sense of humor. Her husband was killed in a plane crash 2 years ago. Our viewers will go crazy over her. I didn't agree to my vetoes being conditional. Maggie pointed to the contract. You did when you signed that. It states that you are allowed to veto 3 of the selected bachelorettes, unless removing said bachelorette will detrimentally change the dynamics of the show. In our eyes, removing the teacher does. He read the stipulation but hadn't thought anything of it. There has to be someone else the viewers can root for. This decision comes from the higher-ups. He thought about pushing the issue further, but would doing so make Maggie suspicious? When they first met, he tried to charm her into viewing things his way, but she'd seen through his ploy. If a man were looking for a wife, this teacher would be at the top of the list. He couldn't risk tipping Maggie off and losing $30,000 before he even started. Why don't you want her on the show? Is it because she was married before? I don't want to talk about it, and since she's staying, it doesn't matter. That was true enough. Finding Mr. Right is in the works. To get the show off to a good start, we want to use our first bachelorette to be someone the viewers are familiar with, someone they've gotten to know on a previous season. The teacher's one of the names being talked about, so the producers would like her to stay long as possible. 44, 45, and 46. Griffin shoved his fisted hands into his coat pockets. What had he gotten himself into? Maggie lifted the other photo. This veto is fine, but may I ask why? When he first read this bio, he couldn't believe a single mother would come on this show. How could she leave her son for 10 weeks? How could she put the love life on or 15 minutes of fame above her child? Sign her up for the Mother of the Year. I'd rather not say. Maggie picked up the photo and scanned the back. If you tell me what the problem is, I will avoid finding a woman with a similar issue. I can't respect any woman who leaves her kid for 10 weeks to go on TV. Maggie's eyes widened and her brows knit together as if she couldn't believe the thought had even occurred to him. I agree. There's no way to explain leaving that like that to a 4-year-old. Something tells me the boy isn't going to have a Brady Bunch childhood. Maggie nodded. Once I get back to Los Angeles, I'll find a replacement. She placed the bios and the contract inside her briefcase beside the desk. We need to get you to Las Vegas immediately. Is that a problem? The sooner he started working, the sooner he could pay his mom's medical bills. I need to find someone to fill in at the ranch, but that shouldn't be that hard. Is there any way I can help? What do you do? The innocent question that had hit Griffin like a hard gut punch, because to tell you the truth, he really didn't know how to fit in at the ranch. He frowned. With that lousy economy, a lot of folks needed extra income. Hell, a high school kid could do what he did. Toting hay bales, watering the horses, fixing busted fence. Took brawn, not brains. Basically, he was a glorified ranch hand, jack of all trades, but master of none. Let's get out of here. He walked across the room to the door. A friend of mine is a band playing at the Halligans tonight. You up for some dancing? Maggie tilted her head and studied him, making him wonder if she let his sidestepping her question slide. I love listening to bands, but dancing isn't my thing. I tend to step on my partner's toes more than I do the dance floor. Maybe you need a better partner. That's 46, 47, and 48. Moving over to page 50. So what if Griffin thought of her as a friend? No one had enough of those. And here's what she's thinking. Keep telling yourself that. Maybe eventually you'll believe it and his words won't hurt as much. Despite that, when she and Griffin stepped inside Halligan's saloon, she vowed to enjoy the night. The down-to-earth restaurant hummed with activity. People sat on the industrial-style padded metal chairs clustered around the simple formica tables. Laughter rang throughout the room, bouncing off the walls. The smell of the French fries burgers wafted through the air, making her mouth water. This is great! I'd have a thought that a California city girl would be more comfortable somewhere more upscale. I've only lived in Los Angeles a few years. Sometimes things there feel so artificial. I prefer places where I can be myself. No one puts on airs here because if they did, someone would kick their butt. As they walked across the toward a table, Maggie glanced at the woman to her right. They have pool tables. Will we have time for a game before the band starts playing? Griffin held her chair for her. What a gentleman. You might not want to play with me. Is that a challenge? If it is, you're on. A mischievous gleam came in his eyes. He said, 8 ball for a $5 game? I hope you're a good loser, Maggie smiled. Beating her brothers and their friends at pool had earned her more money than her childhood lemonade stand, at least until the guys wised up and quit playing her for cash. Before Griffin could respond, a slender waitress with dusty blonde hair sparkled with gray strolled to their table. Good to see you, Griffin. Who's this you brought with you? Page 51, 52, 53. Kathy, meet Maggie Sullivan. She came here to talk business with Rory. I figured she couldn't leave town without a night at the Halligans. If Maggie didn't know any better, she never even suspected he just told a little white lie. He was good, but she was on to him. He turned to her. This is Kathy. She's a regular institution around here. The woman frowned and swatted Griffin's arm. You make me sound like I'm 2 steps away from the grave. He flashed the waitress a brilliant smile, the wattage nearly blinding Maggie. Then he placed his large hand over the older woman's and Don't be mad at me, Kathy, honey. Haven't I always said a man couldn't find a woman better than you? She shook her head. If only I were 10 years younger, Griffin McAllister, I'd give these girls around here a run for their money, chasing you. They wouldn't stand a chance. Course, I don't think John would like that idea much. Maggie smiled. Griffin should wear a sign like they posted on dangerous roads, because a woman would certainly spin out of control when his charm zeroed in on her. You're right, John's a good man, but he's not the understanding. Kathy tossed Maggie a motherly glance and hooked her thumb toward Griffin. You watch out for this one. She's thinking, no kidding. I have been since the moment we met. Good for you. You keep him honest. When Griffin opened his mouth to protest, Kathy hushed him. I need to take your orders. I can't stand all night here talking. After she departed, an awkward, silent stretch baffling Maggie. She was the type of person who met people within 5 minutes she knew their life stories. How come Griffin left her tongue-tied? Sure, he was good-looking and charming, but all the bachelors had been. This did not bode well for the next few months. How long have you been a director? Griffin asked finally. This is my first season, but I've been with the show from the start. 52, 53, 54. Kathy returned a tray of drinks in her hand, placed a glass of beer in front of each of them, and moved on. What made you choose the career in television? Griffin asked after taking a long drink. I feel like I'm in a job interview. What's the deal? I'm curious. Television can't be an easy career to break into, but if you don't want to tell me, we can talk about the weather. Not that. I'll talk. I've always been interested in the theater. As a kid, I wrote and performed plays with my brothers, wanted me to help them with their chores, and I made them agree to act in one of my productions. You drove a hard bargain. I had to. How many boys want to star in The Princess and the Shoe Salesman? Griffin shuddered. I got to side with your brothers. That could kill a guy's reputation. You laugh, but it was one of my highest-grossing shows. You charged people to attend your childhood plays? You bet. Money was tight, thanks to her father cleaning out the bank accounts when he ran off. Familiar anger surged inside her. 2 months after her father had entered college, her mother had discovered she was pregnant. He had quit school, got a factory job, and dutifully married her. However, he never hid his resentment over being quote-unquote trapped into marriage. In her head, she's thinking, let it go. Then I went to New York University to study filmmaking, and here I am. Maggie sipped her beer. The cool liquid slid down her dry throat, soothing it as it went. What about you? Did you ever want to do anything other than work on a ranch? Griffin's smile tightened for a second and then brightened again. Had she hit a sore spot? Life on the ranch is dull compared to working in television. What made... let's see here. I lost my spot. What made you choose to work on a dating reality show? She definitely hit a sore spot. Why else would he keep steering the conversation back to her? She decided to let it go for now. She wanted to work on a critically acclaimed drama or comedy, but those jobs were hard to come by. In the end, she'd taken what she could get to pay her bills. Working on a reality show had stripped off her rose-colored glasses, romantically speaking, but people didn't want to hear that. They wanted to hear the fantasy. 54, 55, 56. I loved watching couples fall in love and knowing I played a part in bringing them together. Griffin laughed. How often do you practice that speech in front of a mirror? This wasn't the first time she defended her work, but how had Griffin guessed that she actually had practice? And how dare he throw it in her face? What I said may have sounded rehearsed, but what we do isn't that much different than a dating service. Except for the group dates, exotic locations, hidden agendas, and cameras. What about finding love yourself? The innocent question left her reeling. The last thing she wanted to do was discuss with a gorgeous man who she'd probably never been turned down for anything was her love life or lack thereof. Thankfully, Kathy returned with their food, and Maggie picked up her knife and cut the huge buffalo burger Griffin had recommended in half and took a bite. This is wonderful. Would I steer you wrong? In a New York minute, and she wasn't sure she'd care. Page 57. You're avoiding my question. Why haven't you found love? You bet she was, and his words stung as much as the second time as they had the first. They asked contestants fewer questions on Jeopardy, Maggie said. My turn now. What are you looking for in a wife? Griffin stared off in the distance, his gaze clouded. That's not an easy question. The good ones never are, but they often reveal the most whether the person answered or not. His hands gripped his beer glass. I like Elizabeth Roy's wife. She makes him laugh, but she gets her dander up when she thinks someone's not treating him right. She's a little dynamo in a knockout package. Maggie tried not to flinch and slouched in her chair when Griffin said he liked petite, attractive women. I'll keep that information in mind when I select a new bachelorette. You better do right by me. Despite his light tone, she sensed a genuine request behind his words. You can count on it. 56, 57. Moving forward. 72 and 73. And then we're stopping tonight. As Griffin glided her around the dance floor for the first time in her life, Maggie felt graceful. His attention focused on her. He wasn't glancing around the room to trade up. She could get lost in this man and not care if anyone ever looked at her for her. In her mind, she's thinking, stop this. You work together. Nothing but a disaster can come from this. Thoughts like that. And at the end of the season, he would propose to another woman. She never should have danced with him. She should have said she had a migraine or a raging toothache, a sudden case of the flu, anything to avoid being in his arms. How would she ever watch him flirt with other women? Watch him hold bachelorettes and kiss them? She never before wanted to trade places with the women on her show, but now she found herself eager to do just that. Knowing all the reasons why she shouldn't have danced with him, Maggie wouldn't have given up the experience for anything. But now the ball was almost over, and she had to think of Griffin like every other bachelor. She worked on the show the last 6 years. But how? She needed a fairy godmother's intervention to pull off that trick. And that's our first book review of Bet on a Cowboy. That's just tidbits. You will get a rating when we finish the book, like always. I'll section it off. I hope to share more of it with you tonight. Let's aim for Wednesday night will be the first night that I'm going to try and celebrate the month of October. I want to get away from politics this month. Let's get back to what we usually do when we get close to the holidays. We focus on that holiday. We try to make the best of that holiday. Let's go back to last year when, all we worried about this time of year was what costume are we going to wear, or our kids going to wear? How much candy are we going to give out? And what are we going to put the candy in? Those kind of things. Let's turn the clock back, so to speak, on what we should be doing. Let's try to focus on the holiday. I'm not talking Corona. I'm not talking politics. Let's focus on the holiday. With that being said, again, I hope you're keeping your social distance. I hope that you're washing your hands, wearing your mask. If you can't wash your hands, have that hand sanitizer nearby. We're all in this together. Let's get through it. God bless. Love each and every one of you. Stay tuned, because there will be more of this book yet to come. And it's been a terrific read. So I bet you it gets a wonderful book rating. Stay tuned.